Greetings. This is Doc Ock coming to you live and direct from Black Facts Headquarters Central here in Kent, Ohio. Yes. Ready for another session, another presentation in the ongoing Doc Ock at Noon and 9 series. We've been going strong since February last year, 2020, and we're still going strong. So when you come here, you know you can't go wrong. All you got to do is just stay for a little while. You don't even have to stay for very long. So let's go ahead and get this party started. First and foremost, what I need y'all to do is, if you're watching on Facebook, give us a like. If you're watching on YouTube, give us a thumbs up. And last but not least, spread the word far and wide to the ends of the earth, out into outer space, into inner space, all over the place. Spread the word about Black Facts, the Tubular Black Facts channel. That's right. Tell your friends and your family to tune in when they can. Thank you very much. Meanwhile, let's do our proverb of the day. Proverb of the day is, one finger alone cannot kill even a louse. One finger alone cannot kill even a louse. Yep. If you ever have to get deloused or deliced, well, hopefully it'll be de-nice. De-lice. Meanwhile, let's continue with our story about Granny Nanny, Queen Nanny, the mother of us all, from the island of Jamaica, one of the Jamaican national heroes or heroines. As a matter of fact, probably the only one that is in the Heroes Plaza. I forget what the exact name for it, but it's like a Heroes Plaza that's over there in Kingstown. And yeah, I don't think there's any other women in that recognized over there. Not that I know of. The only one I know of is Granny Nanny, or as some people call her, Queen Nanny. Queen Nanny. That's right. So we're going to be recounting the story of her life. What we're doing right now is we're going into the background, historical background, and then we're going to get into some more things about her and all of her various forms as Obeah woman and, you know, woman of mystery. Yes, because she is also a woman of mystery. You know, the folkloric aspects of Queen Nanny, and then Nanny as a general. But we want to set the stage properly, so we're going to have to go into this historical background piece, because most people don't know anything about Jamaica and only think of it as a country where there are black people, but there are actually people that were imported from a number of different parts of the British realm. And you know, the sun never set on the British Empire, so you've got people as far flung as China and India with Chinese or Indian roots in Jamaica who are Jamaicans. You got Germans and Scots who are grew up and lived in Jamaica. Colin Powell is related to them, to the Germans. On that side, you've got Africans from Ghana, Dahomey, maybe even the Congo, that are in Jamaica, and oftentimes know which tribe they come from, or at least have an idea of what area they come from, because they were not Jamaica was not a settler colony. Jamaica was one of these absentee landlord colonies where they set it up and then they go home and just wait for people to send them the money, right? Because they didn't really want to stay in Jamaica. So that gives it a whole different flavor in terms of slavery than what we had over here. But it also gives them a different flavor in terms of freedom, because many people went up into the hills. So Queen Nanny is queen of the Maroons. Maroons being those enslaved Africans who escaped and ran up into the hills, all up into the cockpit country, etc. The locksmen, the Rastas, the Rastafari, all up in Akampong Town, okay, in Moore Town, up in Moore Town. There's also a Nanny Town, but nobody lives in Nanny Town anymore. That's a ceremonial place only. And it's one of those spiritual vortexes that only the initiated may go into Nanny Town and come out alive. If you go into Nanny Town and you're not one of the uninitiated, we'll pray for you. Yeah, because you're going to be coming out in a box. Yeah, definitely. So that's what we're going to do today. So we're just going to do a little reading right here. Let's see what we can find out about Nanny, Queen Nanny, leader of the Windward Jamaican Maroons. Spain retained control of Jamaica as a colony until 1655. On May 10 of that year, Great Britain, cognizant of the sorry state of affairs in Jamaica and wishing to expand its holdings in the West Indies, to increase the economic potential of the empire, invaded Jamaica and easily took over the island. Under the command of Admiral William Penn and General Robert Venables, the British entered Kingstown Harbor with 38 ships and 8,000 soldiers. They quickly occupied the main town, and the Spanish governor soon surrendered. This invasion, part of Oliver Cromwell's Western design, was aimed against Spain, with the exception of a small group of resistors. Most of the Spaniards fled to Cuba. Most of the slaves did not. These Africans, having an extensive knowledge of the terrain, fled to the hills and forests and formed the foundation of what would later become the eastern contingent of the most threatening opponents of the British presence in Jamaica, the Jamaican Maroons. When the Leeward Maroon community evolved later, most of its population came from slaves who escaped from plantations later during rebellions. It should again be noted that at this time, the term Maroon was not used. The escaped Spanish slaves were called a variety of names, including fugitive Negroes, Negroes in rebellion, or Carmahali Negroes. It was not until the 1730s that literature began reflecting the use of the word maroon. Foreseeing the disaster that the Maroons would later cause, the British Major General Sedgwick of the British forces wrote the following caveat to Secretary Thurlow in England on March 12, 1656, 1 year after the British invasion. Concerning the state of the enemy on shore here, the Spaniard is not considerable, but about the blacks there are many, who are like to prove as thorns and pricks in our sides, living in the mountains and woods, a kind of life both natural and, I believe, acceptable to them. There scarce a week passeth without one or two slain by them, and as we grow secure, they grow bold and bloody. Be assured they must either be destroyed or brought in upon some terms or other, or else they will be a great discouragement to the settling of a people here. The African population proved in fact to be thorns and pricks in the side of the British, becoming much more of a threat to them than were the Spanish. A 1611 census conducted by the abbot of Jamaica concluded that there were 1,510 inhabitants, consisting of 558 slaves, 523 Spaniards, 173 children, 107 free blacks, 75 foreigners, and 74 Arawak Indians. Half a century later, Other observers noted that the ratio of slaves to Spaniards was about the same. The African population already outnumbered the Spanish at the time of the invasion, and after the invasion, the margin increased as the Spaniards fled to Cuba. The Africans, both free and slave, preferred living free in the mountains rather than living in the islands with the Spaniards, or remaining slaves, or descending into the towns and becoming slaves to new British masters. The few Spaniards who remained held out against the British and attempted to retake the island. This group, led by Don Cristobal de Yassi Arenado, whom the Spanish king named governor of Jamaica, retreated to the mountains and made attacks on the newly formed British settlements. The former African slaves of the Spanish colonialists also established themselves in the mountains in settlements separate from the Spaniards, and were quite prosperous because of their knowledge of the terrain and their agricultural and hunting skills. The Spaniards relied completely on their former slaves for guiding them along trails for food, for developing their crops, for hunting, and also for staging invasions on the British settlements. Records show that nearly every attack on British settlements involved Africans. In short, the population that had once enslaved the Africans was now dependent on them for survival. In his letters to the King of Spain, Xviii constantly stressed, or Xviii constantly stressed the former slaves' loyalty to Spain and his ability to influence them. In a letter to the king in August 1657, Xviii wrote that all the fugitive slaves are under my obedience. This was a gross distortion of the truth. A year later, he received news that his obedient troops had defected to the enemy. In reality, the former slave community was enjoying its newfound freedom and establishing viable, lasting communities and polities. The former slaves would help the Spanish, but only when it was in their best interest. The African population was increased by slaves who escaped from newly established English settlements. This group of slaves, along with a few Spaniards, began to harass the British seriously and proved to be an elusive and dangerous enemy. While news of their successes spread through the newly formed colony, more slaves felt encouraged to run, joining the Spanish fugitive slave communities. Others established their own separate Maroon communities. A leader emerged from one group of the original Spanish Maroons, known by his African name as Juan Lubola or Lubolo. The Spanish knew him as Juan de Bolas. Originally, Lubola and his followers were aiding their former masters against the British. In a move that was viewed as treachery to the other island Maroons, however, Lubola signed a treaty with the British that granted him and his followers land and freedom. Under this agreement, he became a colonel and magistrate with power over his people for everything except life and death. In exchange for helping the British in the fight against the Spanish and other fugitive slaves. After Lubola went over to the British, Xviii, realizing that the Spanish did not stand a chance of defending themselves without the help of Lubola's people, agreed to leave the island. Lubola was made colonel of the black militia of the island and assisted the British in several raids on different Maroon communities. As might be imagined, this alliance outraged other Maroons, and they began a series of raids on plantations to demonstrate their discontent. The largest group of Maroons, preferring to remain fugitive, were known as Vermahales, Negroes under the direction of Juan de Serras. They were also known by the British as Vermihales, Carmahali with a K, and Vermiholis Negroes. They were very effective in their raids against the British. And the then governor of Jamaica, D'Oyly, attempted on several occasions to sue for peace, offering the fugitives 20 acres of land per person plus freedom if they would turn themselves in. None chose to respond to his reputedly generous offer. Instead, this offer made them realize how much power they possessed, as they were so feared by the British. Ultimately, this offer promoted even more daring raids. Lubola, now the official bloodhound of the British, was sent out to his former people to endeavor their reduction. This was the opportunity to enact the vengeance the Maroons had long awaited, and they did so by creating an ambush for Lubola, where he and his people were cut to pieces. Although the British continued their attempts to subdue them, the Maroons retreated to the northern part of the island and continued to exist, grow, and fight off the British for 83 more years. 3 Spanish Maroons became the nucleus of the Windward Maroons. It is interesting to note that the impact that being descendants of the Spanish Maroons had on the Windward Maroons. They were fierce in their determination to hold on to their lands. They had been in possession of these lands for 83 years by 1739 and were not ready to give them up at the conclusion of the Maroon Wars with Britain. The Leeward Maroons were descendants of a more recent slave rebellion and were quicker to sign a peace treaty with the British. The Leewards had more recently escaped from slavery, and they wanted as little as possible to do with the British. Originally, the Maroon population, after the 1655 British invasion, was loosely structured and spread across the entire island. Maroon communities existed in communication with other Maroon settlements and were located in remote and mountainous areas where access was difficult and virtually impossible. And virtual invisibility possible, where access was difficult and virtual invisibility was possible. As the British began to populate the island and set up plantations in many areas, the Maroons were gradually cut off from each other, and communication from group to group became more difficult. Maroon historian Barbara Kopitoff notes the Spanish Maroons initially had villages in both the eastern and western interior of the island, but that later, no date given, they all joined in the east. Dallas confirms that they settled in the east. 2 distinct groups emerged: the Windward Maroons on the eastern side of the island in the upper reaches of the Blue Mountains, the highest peaks of Jamaica, and the Leeward Maroons on the west side in an unhospitable group of small, steep, of small, steep mountains known as the Cockpit Country. As previously noted, the origins of these 2 groups were different. The nucleus of the Windward Maroons was the Spanish Maroon establishment, while in the west, a slave rebellion in the late 17th century provided most of the population, including the father of Kojo, otherwise known as Cudjoe, their most formidable leader. In most texts, this Leeward Maroon leader's name is written as Cudjoe, Cudjoe. However, because Cudjoe is an anglicization of the African name, for the purposes of this text, the name shall be written like we write it in Africa, Kojo, Kojo, quite simply. Okay, and Kojo is someone who is born on a, Sunday, a Jordan, yeah, Sunday is Kojo is somebody who's born on a Monday, male child born on a Monday. That would be Kojo. Yeah, I always remember it by a song, so that's, you saw my eyes roll back in my head. That was me trying to recall the song. Yeah, maybe one day I'll sing the song for you. It's definitely relevant in this case because the song is also from Indiakan language from Ghana. So that concludes today's presentation. We will be returning on the morrow with a continuation of the story of Nanny, but this evening, 9 o'clock, we'll be continuing with the story of Mary Ellen Pleasant, otherwise known as Mammy Pleasant. And we'll talk about more about that Mammy thing and why they call her Mammy, but why we prefer to call her by her name. We want to say her name, Mary Ellen Pleasant. She ain't no Mammy, and her name ain't Sammy. It's Mary Ellen Pleasant. That's right. We've been talking about Marys for quite some time. We talked about the Virgin Mary, the Black Madonna. We talked about Mary Stagecoach Fields, and now we're talking about Mary Ellen Pleasant. And this may not be all the Marys that we talk about because we've got some more. Meanwhile, you know what you need to do. If you're watching on Facebook, give us a like. If you're on YouTube, where you should be, make sure to go ahead and give us a thumbs up and then subscribe. Subscribe button is right below. Hit that button. It won't take but a second and you'll be done, but then you'll be notified anytime we come back online. In the meanwhile, peace at least with justice, because anything less disgusts us. And we love being discussed, but we do not like being disgusted. Yes. All right. We'll be black tonight. Look for us then, 9 o'clock. Peace out. In the meanwhile, we're going to the extra.